Rodriguez. I am your host for today's chat with my brother, Jose Rodriguez. Get to know a little bit about him. The point of this podcast is for me to interview people that I find interesting, bring them a spotlight or a highlight so that others can get to know a little bit more about them. And who better than to start with my coach and my brother, my best friend. We were both born here in the Valley.
Where's the Valley for those that don't know?
The Valley, for those that don't know, we're about 3 minutes away from the border of Mexico. So we were born here, and we traveled about every year. We were in a different city, and then for about 4 years we lived in Indiana, came back to the Valley, and just went through different schools. So he's a UH graduate, and I kind of want to start there. Tell us about your experience.
Yeah, so I went to University of Houston from 2014 to 2018. I studied organizational leadership, and my specific track was training and development, specifically to like business, not like kinesiology. But during that time, I was a track and field athlete there, so I did the shot and then the discus later on. So I graduated in 2018, moved back to the Valley, and then I started just working in the school district, coaching.
In high school, I know I remember us looking to get you into some college recruiting programs, etc. And you were up there along with our boy Lionel Delis from
Puerto Rico.
From Puerto Rico. Oh man, I love you, Leo. Shout out to Leo. So what made you say, you know what, I'm going to stop this basketball journey and I'm going to transition into throwing the shot and the discus, something that you've never done in our entire lives. We didn't know what that was. We didn't know what that looked like.
Yeah, so I started doing the shot and the discus, or the shot only in 7th grade, because in 7th grade, in middle school, during my 7th grade year, the way it worked at that time was you had to do 3 sports to go on this field trip, and the field trip at the end of the year was to go watch an NBA playoff game. So I had played football, basketball, and I needed another sport. I didn't play soccer, so I didn't do that because I wasn't any good at it. I didn't play tennis just because I struggled at it as well. And then I would try out for golf, and that instantly went poorly. So I could get hit with a club in the head. That was enough for me to say, not for me. So literally that same day when this kid named Trent got hit with a club in the head, got a big old ball in his head, I walked over to the track coach. I said, "Hey, let's run some track. You know, I want to get faster for football, basketball, whatever." He's like, "Yeah, well, we kind of got all our sprinters already, but you could go over there, try throwing instead." So I started to throw in 7th grade to complete my 3rd sport, so that way I can go on that field trip. So middle school athletics is, at least specifically back then, specifically where we're from, was pretty poor, just because there isn't a lot of value in middle school athletics in terms of coaching value, at least back then. You had some very high quality coaches, but typically they were focusing on the high school or private. And we could afford private training, but at the same time we never asked for a private training, just because of our family dynamic and stuff. So that's when I got introduced to track, and I got 5th at my first meet, then 3rd, and then I didn't lose after that. So it wasn't something that it was something that I was good at, but it was just all by luck. Like, I just connected to the implement, and for whatever reason it would go. So did that 7th, 8th grade year. So when I got to high school, I purely wanted to focus on, at first, football. It was a brand new school. We had a lot of high level coaches in every sport, but there was just a lot of lack of development around me. And looking back, there is this level of selfishness involved for athletes that are trying to be really good. So in team sports, that's not always great whenever you have an athlete that's very selfish for the desire to be great, because if the rest of the program isn't at a level to produce wins or to produce something of value, that's when like a negative culture starts to happen. So I noticed that right away my freshman year. And I was like, you know what, I'm just not going to do this. So I quit football my freshman year, essentially. And that was kind of a problem. So I was like, look, I got to do something else. So I did cross country and basketball my sophomore year. So I did cross country and basketball. And I did cross country purely to not play football, because they're like, oh, if you're doing nothing else, you should play football. And I was like, oh, well, I'm doing something else. I'm running cross country. So I was out there 180 pounds running cross country. Yeah. So that was hilarious, but at the same time, it was good. It got me in shape for basketball. And that, my sophomore year was our first year of varsity in the school history, and it went really well. So as time progressed, got to my junior year, that's when Leo came in the mix and other guys.
Shout out Leo.
Yeah, shout out Leo. So there was once again just this clash between myself and the coaching staff and even the teammates. We all were just getting different messages. So what ended up happening kind of mid-season was just this discussion between me and the coach, and he was like, look, it might just be better that you're not on the team. I was like, hey, I understand. So I stopped playing basketball mid-season, and at that point, it was my junior year, I was kind of like, well, if I'm going to get out of the Valley, which was my goal, like since I was a kid, because I just wanted to get out of this area, I felt like athletics was the way to go. Although I was a smart kid, I just felt like athletics played a big role in my life. So I was like, I need to do something. So I started to just pay more attention to track, because although I didn't put a lot of focus into it my freshman and sophomore year, I still did it because our school population was small, so like get out there. So I would go out there and I'd practice for like 10-15 minutes and then go to meets. And our coaches would kind of like convince me to go by saying, if you get first place, we'll buy you a combo of whatever you want to eat. So that's what I would
give me that triple meat.
Yeah, so that's what I'd
cheese.
do. I'd go and I'd compete, and I would win at these freshman and JV meets, and I'd get food, and it'd be cool because I'd be in lunch and I'd be the only one eating, outside food or whatever. So my junior year, I was like, look, I've clearly been decent at this event. If I try harder and I dedicate myself to it, maybe something fruitful can come of it. So at that time, I went through our third coach at that point in time, Coach Garza. So at the middle of that year, I kind of had a conversation with him and said, hey, look, I really want to be a college athlete. I really want to get out of the Valley. Hopefully you can help me get there. So he did his homework and he did his research, and he started getting in contact with coaches here in the Valley locally that had more coaching experience than him to try to get me to be better. So we met with this coach named Coach Howell. If you're from Texas and you know anything about those, you know who Coach Howell is. So in one practice, I jumped 8 feet. I would really only power throw at that point in time. So I would just stand at the front of the ring and throw it as hard as I could. So I went from throwing about 42 feet to about 50 feet in one practice. So at that point, I kind of realized, oh, maybe I'm in a position to have potential in this event. So I just continued to train, and that led me to say, you know what, I can be as good as I want to be in this sport, and nothing and no one can hold me back. So that's what really attracted the sport to me at that point in time. So I just trained year round, going into my senior year, and luckily I was in a position to get viewed by a few schools, and ultimately I decided on the University of Houston, and then kind of that's when everything just took off, because the training was very different, the ideas were different, everything about athletics in general was just completely different once you get into a system that actually is meant to produce results.
You mentioned you were your first of your class when PSJ Southwest, which is here in Far, Texas. When it first opened up, it was just a freshman school. It was just you.
So we never had an upper class. We were always
you were the upper class. Now, did you ever feel a sense of your records? You have a big board up there that has your records, your your distances, and then you're a graduate of the University of Houston. Did you ever feel a pressure or a chip on your shoulder, like, I gotta prove these younger kids, like I gotta show them I'm a leader, I'm the senior, and that we can. You never feel any type of.
I hated that we didn't have an upper class. I feel like if we had an upper class, it would have set structure in place easier. Being the guinea pig has its benefits because you get a lot of attention, and that's helpful. But at the same time, it's just like sometimes troubleshooting isn't the best for when you have high goals. So similar to like with technology, now that you're messing with technology, if you're working on something and all of a sudden you get a Windows update, you know, it's the worst time, it's the most inconvenient time because you feel like you have to put everything on pause because you can't actually do what you're trying to do. And that's what being the guinea pig for athletics was like, because although you might feel like you're ready to be somewhere or do something, the situation was there, the facilities weren't there. We didn't have a weight room until like late into second semester. We didn't have throwing rings until my junior year, I think. We didn't really have throwing rings. So being the guinea pig is good in a sense because you do get high level instruction at times, but at the same time, if it's not attractive to coaches to be there, it's not attractive because the facilities aren't there, then it turns into kind of this negative thing, especially when you have other schools nearby that were already built and like solidified in the foundation. Like Bears, the school that you went to, had a very strong foundation, a very strong tradition, a very strong culture. So none of that existed at the school that I was at. Everyone was kind of like for themselves at that point. And like even now the school's barely, I now coach at that school. So now that school is barely finding its foundation in terms of tradition and things of that nature. And it's already been 13 years since it's opened. So these other schools have been open for over 50 years, over 20 years. So it's just different.
And I'm glad you mentioned that he's now you're just a throws coach?
Like, yeah, just coach throws.
So he coached throws at PSJ Southwest, and he has a recent success story of an athlete, our younger sister, Ana Rodriguez. I want to maybe talk about the challenges of coaching someone that's so close to you. That's not just another student, it's your own sister. What were some of the challenges of getting her in preparation to get to the university level, to be able to throw? And we don't have to necessarily talk about 7th, 8th grade, but more in the high school development.
Every thrower is different, and so the system changes based off of the thrower. Doesn't matter who it is. So I don't approach her the same as that I approach other kids. Everyone has a specific path to grow, and ultimately you just got to find the path and then kind of cycle that through. But specifically the challenge, what I learned early on with her that helped me with other kids after the fact is you can't push a kid or someone, whatever level it is, whatever profession it is, you can't push someone past the point that they don't want. So Anita was the one that told me that she wanted to be a college athlete. I didn't tell her. I told her, look, if you want to do it for fun. Like, don't go out there and don't put pressure on yourself for these things. Okay. She liked tennis a lot.
That's right.
So I told her, hey, go play tennis. She liked volleyball. I told her to join. She didn't join for whatever reason. So at a certain point, she's the one who told me, hey, look, I want to take this a little more seriously. So taking it seriously in words is one thing, but taking it seriously in action is a different thing. So there was times where I knew that she wasn't doing what she needed to do, and I'd bring it to her attention, but it's a little weirder and it's a little different when it's your sister compared to a different athlete, because you tell it to a different athlete and you go home and they go home. So when it comes to coaching, ultimately, or when it comes to development and anything, there's a balance that needs to be found between pushing someone and knowing the level that they want to be pushed to. Because if I tell you my goal is to complete one push-up, the effort that would need to be given to that training would be extremely different to the effort of saying, I want to be able to do one push-up with a fridge on my back. Very different level of intensity needs to be done. So if your goal is to only accomplish one push-up, no weight on you, there isn't really this massive need to do all of this crazy intense stuff, because once you complete that one push-up, you might be satisfied. And that's it. You might say, I don't ever want to do a push-up ever again in my life. And you'd be perfectly okay with that. And then other people would say, oh, well, I want to try doing 10 push-ups now, or whatever. Versus someone that says, I want to do a push-up with a fridge on my back, right? The intensity to accomplish that primary goal is completely different. So would it make sense to approach that one person that doesn't want any weight on their back the same as the person that does want the weight on the back, right? So similarly to talking about Anita, right? There's a huge difference between training someone to be collegiate level athlete to someone that just wants to be on varsity, or someone that just wants to place at a JV meet, or someone that just wants to be on a team. Each of those desires is very different, and each of those training intensities is very different. So at the end of the day, you write the program or you write the information and you provide the information, and all that it comes down to is the person's willingness to accomplish that. So for me personally, as when I was an athlete, I was extremely self-motivated. I didn't really need someone to say, oh, well, you gotta wake up early today to go do this, or you gotta stretch at night, or you gotta eat these things. At the end of the day, it was my own goal, so I shouldn't rely on someone else to do it. And that's kind of the way I approach coaching, but it's a little different now on the other side of things, just because sometimes young athletes don't understand the importance of certain things. Young athletes value things like, they highly value things like friendships or romance or work. Or I was one of those kids that valued, I had a girlfriend, I had a job, I was working 40 hours a week, I had all of these advanced classes, I was taking college classes. So there was a time frame in which I was sleeping for like 2 hours a night. And I felt like that was a smart move to do. Looking back, it probably wasn't, but I was accomplishing everything I needed to accomplish. I was training, I was lifting, I was getting money that I needed to get. I had an okay relationship with my girlfriend. I was being a brother, a son, being a good student, had a 4.0 GPA. So I needed to do everything. I did everything that I needed to do. The thing that suffered was the 2 hours of sleep. Now I see kids and they want to do all those things, but they still want to sleep 8 hours. Something has to give. And back then, if I could do it all over again, I probably would have not had a girlfriend. I probably would have not had a job. I probably would have prioritized sleeping, training, and academics, and that's the extent of it. So that was kind of the advice I also gave to Anita. And she kind of listened. She had a job, and I was like, look, you really don't need a job. If you need something, just ask me or ask you or someone else. So at that point, when she got rid of her job and actually narrowed her focus down to just a handful of things, that's when the progress happened the most for her.
I remember that when he came down from U of H to visit, at that point in time, we'll get to that next, where now I'm his guinea pig and he's my coach. I remember him giving me a 10-pound shot put, and at that point in time I was bench pressing maybe 325 pounds, something like that. And so I thought, man, I should be able to launch this. I was like, how far do you throw this ball? And he was like, oh, like 40, 50 feet. I was like, yeah, I can throw 50 feet. And he just like, all right, bro, go ahead. I almost dislocated my shoulder trying to chuck that thing. And I threw it, 18 feet or less?
Yeah, this was when I was in high school. This was when I was in high school, yeah. He threw
18 feet.
Yeah,
so truly, it opened my eyes to say, you know what, strength isn't everything in track and field. It's definitely a lot of technique, and it's definitely being patient with the process. He recently tried getting, just openly started showing me the motion of how to turn your body and how to center yourself, and I was like, that's a no-go for me. It's very impressive, the athleticism that comes and the power that you have to produce and the torque you have to produce to throw, specifically the discus, which I admire heavily the amount of cardiovascular intensity and training and conditioning you have to have just to turn your feet through the ground. It's kind of insane, and mad props. And for those that want to know, what was your max squat when you were at University of Houston?
My max squat, well, we would go like by triples. We almost never did singles, just because for the specific sport, it lowers the risk of injury. Just because it is easy to get into a weight room where there's a lot of like energy, and you feel like, you know what, I could throw on another 10 pounds, and those 10 pounds turn onto another 10 pounds. And when you go for a single, so typically when we do max, we do triples, and triples really keep you honest on what you're doing. So my heaviest squat for triples was like 570. So I don't remember now what that equals to. But
It's ridiculously impressive.
yeah, I mean,
Anything above 500 pounds is ridiculous, and you're a natural athlete. You know, you couldn't take any PEDs or anything like that. Now, being that you just talked about that, I love that you bring that up, because it's a point that I have here, which is safe maxing out. I know that when I started when he started coaching me, he came down, he had graduated, and I was a one hit, and that's it, right? For some reason, I could bench press 315 for one, and I would give it my all, and I could do it. And I could also do that for 325 and 335 and 345, but it was just one and done. And when he found that out, he didn't know that at that point, but he found out, and he said, there's something wrong here, bro. Like, how are you outputting that much force, yet you can only do 315 for one? Like, at that point, my max, when we really got serious training, my max was 365 pounds. But how am I doing 365 for one, 345 for one, 315 for one? That doesn't...
Yeah, because you couldn't do it for two.
I couldn't do it for two. I couldn't do not even for two. And so you're like, you know what? I told him, hey man, and it wasn't a humbling experience for me. I said, you know what the heck you're talking about?
Before we got to that point, we would just lift kind of together, kind of just to hang out, just to be active. And then, so, you know, sometimes you'd lead the workout, sometimes I'd lead the workout.
Yeah.
And what would happen would be, when you'd lead the workout, I would kind of just be like, you know, chilling. Like, I wouldn't be sweating.
Yeah.
I'd be like, and you'd be like, oh yeah, like it was a good workout. Like, and I was like, yeah, I mean, I guess.
Yeah.
And then I was like, look, let's try these things, right? So whenever I started leading workouts, like, I would obviously, you know, be working, and you'd be dying.
Dead on the floor.
And then you'd be like, oh, and I remember there was times where you didn't like it, but I was like, look, like, I mean, what are you trying to do? What are we doing here? Like, are we just here for a good time, or are we here to work out? And then eventually that turned into specific goals for you. Because my goal at the time was just to lose weight.
Yeah.
Your goal, you really didn't have one.
Didn't have a single.
And then you set a goal and say, look, I want to bench 405. So then at that point I said, look, if that's your goal, then let's train you for that purpose, not just to mess around and like just have a good time. Yeah. So that's when your training started to change, and the focus of your training was completely different and very new, because there was things that you just never knew about.
Things I didn't think about, things I wasn't aware of, and you went into coach mode right away. You said, what's your goal? I said, well, I want to be stronger. What does that mean? What is strength? I said, well, none of my friends, no one that I went to high school with can, or maybe one guy, can bench 405. And that's 4 plates, man. You said, give me a specific number. I said, 405 pounds, something ridiculous, right? And we were just talking about, like, you have to have ridiculous goals. So, you going back to this safe max, you said, okay, from the very beginning, I want to see where you're really truly at. Yeah. And you brought up this thing called Rule of 10. Rule of 10, from what I understand, and maybe you can correct me here, is five reps at a percentage, 3 reps, and then 2 at any given percentages. I believe it's 85, 90, 95.
Yeah, but before you actually get into percentages, kind of like, at least for the baseline for you, it was, okay, do a weight that you feel like you could do for 5 reps.
There we go.
And you went like, I don't know, I think you went maybe 275. And then, no, you went like 265. And then it turned into, okay, that moved this way. It didn't move great, it didn't move terribly. So let's add this much weight, depending on how it looks. Because it's just a feeler, right?
Yeah.
So I think you ended up getting like 320 for 2. So although you previously had maxed 365 for a single, and it was a nasty single, you barely got 320 by 2. So your true max, although you could like rough it out for 365, your true max and like a safe max really wouldn't be that. Your real safe max would be like 330, 335. I think it was like 333 when all the math got done correctly. So it's like, look, this is where you're realistically at safe. Like if there's no spotter, it's you by yourself, this is probably what you could hit barely with the way things are moving for you. So all your percentages at that point got based off of that. And the next time you do a rule of 10, then you can go like 80, 88, 90, or 88, 90, 95. Just depends on kind of how comfortable you feel and how the day goes.
And for so long, for months on end, we never hit a 1 rep max. It was, can you do this for 5? Yes, okay.
Yeah, you didn't do a 1 rep until literally like a year
later,
2 months later, I think. That's when you hit 405, because you said, look, let's just take if we could do 405. And that was the only time that we ever did a single.
So that video was on my Instagram, but that day I wasn't expecting to hit 405. He just said, today's the day. And I was like, what? Today's the day for what? He said, you're hitting 405. And I was like, I don't know that I can do it. And that's something I want to talk about is so much of my training, I felt that I couldn't do something, or I felt, man, like I don't believe in myself, or this feels really heavy. And he was always that voice of like, look, man, you can do this. I've seen you develop. I'm telling you can do this, and today's the day you're moving 405. I was like, all right, bro, I trust you literally with my life, because if this 405 crushes me, I'm going to the hospital. So it was a miraculous thing. I moved it, and it's there. Proof is there. Proof is in the pudding. And right after I hit 405, I turned to look at him, and I said, do you think I could hit 500?
No.
And he was like, no.
No.
And I was like, I want to hit 500. I want to hit 500 pounds bench, because why not? And it was an incredible moment for me. This is now my 4th year training to try and hit 500, and he's just become this very important part of that process. I just show up. I don't think about the training. He says, here's what you're doing today, and do it. And so much of it is always scary, because I'm like, how hard are we going today? And he's just like, it's going to be a bad one. I'm like, oh man, get an ambulance ready, because I'm on the floor, throwing up, or I can't breathe. But I want to talk about overcoming, you as a coach, overcoming the injuries that I went through. So tore my pec once, messed up my psoas, couldn't walk, dislocated my toes, shoulder came out of place. How did you say, you know what, let me take a step back and work around these injuries? Because there was a point where I couldn't do a single push-up because of my pec.
Yeah.
And you said, that's fine, we're going to work on your rotator cuff. And I'm sorry, prior to us moving to get to 500, he said, look, man, realistically, we're going to have to restart from the beginning, because at 405, you are a little bit, outside of this angle. If you want to hit 500, your hips are coming up, your butt's coming up, your quads aren't strong enough, your wrists aren't strong enough, your neck is out of place. Like, it was so much technicalities, your feet are moving. So we really restarted from 225 and up. And I felt it, I did hurt my ego. I was like, dude, like, I can do 405. Like, why are we working with 135 pounds? And I remember to this day, I remember you said, all right, put 135 pounds on incline and do it for 16 reps. I was like, 16 reps? What the hell is that, right? One set in, it was impossible. I was full of blood and pumped. And you're like, yeah, man, like you're not ready to really push. So we started doing a lot of eccentrics, training just differently. And I figured out right away, it's the intensity, it's not how heavy. Right?
Yeah, and it's also like knowing your body, just because we already knew that you had, it took a year for you to hit 405 just because we knew how many issues your body had. Like, your mobility's always been really bad. You've always had a bad shoulder. Your core is weak. Overall, you were just not strong.
Yeah.
Like, you were strong compared to other people, but for the goals that you had, you just weren't strong. And you didn't have a good foundation or a good structure. So it took a year because we were just trying to restructure your body. And the training was essentially for that. And you progressed overall very well, and you got 4 or 5, and it was great. But to push something heavy, although like a lot of times when you look at people that are very strong, like powerlifters or strongmen, they may not look extremely athletic, but they have to be extremely athletic. So you're required good mobility, you're required strong core, you're required overall strength. Like your grip strength has to be there. You need to have healthy calves. You need, like, everything just needs to be good about your body. So the big battles for you were your mobility, your sleep, and I mean your diet, right? But the diet, it's something that's been a problem. It's an ongoing problem. Your sleep has slowly gotten better, and your mobility is like one of those things that fades in and out for you. So when it comes to like the injuries that you've had, it's just a matter of it's always been aware of the priority, and the first thing that matters most is health and safety. The goal is never to get injured. So there's times where I would like to push you harder than we do push, but there's no point because you get hurt. And as it is, you're already dying at the level that we were at, and I'm kind of like, there's no point. So, I mean, what we do isn't easy, but it's also not to the level that I would like it to be. So it's just being patient and being aware of, look, it's not going to take a year. It's going to take more than that, just because all the issues that you've had, you probably need surgery. But you said, nah, I don't want to do surgery. I'll do surgery after
500, I'm getting surgery.
I'm kind of like, okay, then fine, we just have to be precautious.
Yeah.
And that can also be annoying on your end, just because you're like, well, why isn't it getting there sooner? And I get that, but at the same time, it's like, well, you know, can you lay down and let your wrist touch the floor? No. Then don't complain. You know, and it's just being realistic with yourself, and me having to be realistic with you a lot of times. There's a lot of moments where I have to like put you in check and say, look, dude, you're complaining about something that you shouldn't be complaining about. You know, so
I like that you bring that up, because there's so many, again, learning moments, teachable moments for me have been keeping my ego in check. So for example, not that a few weeks ago, I hit a new PR of 405 pounds for 5 reps. Felt fantastic. It was great. Got it in the video. Amazing. And then a week or two later, I did 365 for 5, and I was struggling. And I'm like, I felt like a failure, truly. And you know this. But at the same time, you reminded me, look, man, that day you did 405 for 5, but that's all we were doing. We were only bench pressing on that day. Over here, to today's workout, we're doing 365 for 5, but you're also supersetting with back. So you're tired, you're fatigued. Be proud that you're moving 365 for 5, because your body's at its peak right now. And so I'm still learning to say, you know what, it's not a failure. And I remember you, and it's a very important quote, you said, win the rep. If you can't push it up, I'll help you, right? And so that you, as an athlete, I've gotten to a point where I feel like I'm gonna quit, and you're like, look, man, I don't need you to push it up. Successfully load it and control it on the way down, and let me worry about getting it up. You give me as much as you can, even though it's minimal. I'm still overloading, because you know what? I'm able to get 2, 3, 4 more negative reps, versus if I just say, oh, I'm done, I'm tired, right?
Yeah.
And that's something very important that I think a lot of athletes don't maybe think about, because maybe they don't have a coach, they're doing it on their own. And you get to that point of like, I have so much lactic acid build up today, during today's workout. My triceps were gone, and you said, don't worry, I got it. I'm holding it. And I was like, dude, I'm literally like gonna let go of this. And you're like, don't let go. Like, just hold on, and it's negative, and I'm gonna pull. Negative, and I'm gonna pull. And I think that having a partner or having a coach that can push you past that, I think it's super important. Now I want to move on to, just to wrap this up and kind of finalize this first interview, or just talk. What are some goals that you have as an athlete yourself, and secondly, as a coach, and lastly, just as someone who's struggling just like everybody else? You know, everybody's like, oh, well, I want to do this, I want to do that, and they never actually put into action and you're one of those that once you commit, you're all in.
Yeah.
So, I guess, what are some goals as an athlete? And we'll start there.
Yeah, well, I don't really see myself as an athlete. I'm just like this dude, you know. So I'm just this guy that goes to the gym sometimes and works out and has a good time. So I don't know, just to be healthy above all else. That's what matters most. So whatever that looks like, just being healthy. So overall, I think I'm getting there. You know, my health is it's never really been a problem, but internally, you got to just be aware. I'm 27, so as time progresses, health becomes more and more important. So just keeping my joints healthy and strong, keeping my muscles strong, getting my heart and my lungs, you know, in decent shape. So that's really it on that end in terms of health and fitness. But as far as like a specific number, as far as like strength levels, there really isn't a goal. It's just, you know, whatever feels good. So who knows what that is. As far as coaching goes, it's just to help whoever I can help achieve whatever goals they have. So when it comes to training and as a coach and also as someone that enjoys fitness, it's just a matter of just continuing to do it. I tell this to like everyone, like it's not that hard. Like it genuinely isn't that hard. You literally just got to keep on doing whatever it is that you're doing. It's just like walking, you know, just keep on putting another foot in front of the other, keep on going. So whenever you're pushing, whenever you're struggling, if your arms work, you get the next rep. You know, if your legs work, you get the next rep. And if you fail, then you fail, and then you can't, and that's it. But if you haven't failed and you actually can continue to move, then keep on going. You know, you don't have to rack it yet. And then as far as just in general, yeah, I don't know. In general, it's just finding whatever version of success I can find. I do take pride in doing things well, so it's just finding that next thing to do. So I work in a school that deals with, and I deal with technology a lot, so it's just be the best that I can in that, and then if I feel like I'm at my peak, then try to move on to something else that kind of provides more fulfillment and continue to help others with whatever development they need and just continue to train. That's about it.
If someone out there is serious, and I know that you're a judge, you have great judgment of character, you're always willing to help. You know, guys come up to us all the time at the gym and they're like, hey man, can you give me advice? And you're like, yeah. You will literally stop whatever we're doing and you're coach them. Okay, let's see what you're doing. Let me fix your form and whatever, and you give them just advice. And it's not like bullshit advice. You're giving them your like genuine advice.
To my friend Guillermo, who's my old teammate, and we were talking about that happening because he's recently started lifting again and stuff. And he was talking. I was telling him about this guy that's trying to just get stronger in his bench. I think he said his goal is to bench 315. And
the guy with the glasses and the
and Guillermo was like, yeah man, real easy, real right. He's like, it's real easy. He's like, I'm sure you just told him, you know, just do sets of 5 and that'll be that.
That's pretty good. 5x5 bullshit.
And I was like, no dude, I told him like, you know, I told him the advice that I gave the guy, and he's like, I would have never done that. I would have never have done that. And yeah, it's just about, at the end of the day, like I mentioned earlier, if you want something, it's up to you. So if you have a specific goal, it's really up to you to help yourself. So whether it's doing the research, whether it's asking someone, whether it's getting a plan and then just following through with it. So that's the bare minimum of what it is.
You have two, I wouldn't consider myself a success. I think that's more of a genuine success because she's a college athlete. But still, you got me to 405. And
we got a 470 actually.
Huh? Well,
we got a 470.
470, yeah. But right now we're 470, 475, maybe even less because of injuries and stuff. But we're gonna get to 500. I think it's just a matter of time. For those that are, you know, out there and they say, you know what, maybe not necessarily you that they want to hire as a coach, but what would you recommend for someone that says, you know what, I'm scared to reach out because I'm shy or whatever? How would you, or what would you recommend for them to say, you know what, let me go find a training partner, or let me reach out to someone that is gonna really truly help me get to that next level?
Well, it's really about figuring out your goal first, because
So work backwards, yeah.
Yeah, figure out your goal first, because you may not need any of those things yet. You know, if your goal is to run a 12-minute mile, you don't need a coach for that. You know, just get some foundational work going and be consistent first. If your goal is to run like a sub-4 mile, then yeah, you might want to get a coach and a training partner and a training group, and that makes your life a little easier. So it's just finding your goal first, and then just being educated in what it is that you're doing. Because I was talking to one of the trainers at the gym that we lift, and he was pretty much saying, like, everyone in here knows at least a little bit, you know? So, and that's very true. Anyone that typically goes to the gym knows at least a little bit about lifting, and their knowledge might be different, right? But it's just about knowing. You can always take something from someone. It may not be the best advice, but it might be something that you can kind of mold to something that is beneficial to you. So it's just about observing and listening. And ultimately, if you do feel like you need a training partner or you do need an actual coach, it's finding the right fit for your goal. Because there's times where if your goal is to be strength oriented and you don't take the time to listen to someone that's maybe pushing more volume, you may feel like it's useless. You may feel like, oh, if I'm strength training, I should be only going 5 reps and under, right? And hey, if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do, that's not a problem. But there is benefits to volume when it comes to strength training, in terms of just health, in terms of just being consistent. So it's first and foremost finding your goal, and then from there, finding what aligns to your goal. So I wouldn't hire me to coach someone to kick a soccer ball really well. You know what I mean? So if your goal is, I want to be a better soccer player, I'll go find someone for that goal.
Absolutely.
So above all else, before anything else, just find consistency. That's literally above all else. If you continue to find repetitions, even if it's wrong, you will get something out of it. And then eventually, you know, ideally you learn and you grow and you better yourself. And then the results will change. But at its base and at its minimum, finding that consistency and that discipline is important. I think motivation is great, but it's also not great, because when the motivation leaves, you're left with your habits, and if your habits are poor, like your mobility, right? Sometimes you're motivated to work on your mobility because you're in pain, right? And in those moments, you're doing mobility every day. But the moment you feel better, you say, I really don't need to work on it.
For sure.
Right? So the habits come into play, and those habits ultimately is what leads you to be successful or not successful.
Absolutely. All right, man. Thank you so much for your time, guys. Thank you for tuning in, if you did at all. And I want to do more of these. Just talk to people that, again, I find interesting, that are valuable to the community, especially here locally in McAllen, Far Texas area, RGV. And that's it, man. Thank you so much.
Yep.